Today, we're going to talk about a story that is as heartbreaking as it is baffling. It's the story of Otto Warmbier, a young American student whose adventurous spirit took him on a trip to the world's most isolated country. A trip that ended in an international tragedy and a mystery that honestly remains unsolved to this day. So that's the central question we're really digging into here. How did a 5-day tourist trip for New Year's Eve completely unravel into a diplomatic standoff and ultimately cost a young man his life? To even begin to understand what happened, we first have to understand who Otto Warmbier was before all of this began. He wasn't just a headline. He was a real person with a really bright future ahead of him. So who was Otto? Well, he was this vibrant, incredibly accomplished 21-year-old, a student at the University of Virginia. He was the salutatorian of his high school class, and by all accounts, just full of life. He had a real passion for seeing the world and was already a seasoned traveler. He'd been to Europe, Cuba, and Ecuador. This trip to Asia was actually part of a study abroad program he was doing in Hong Kong. So while he's over in Asia, this idea of visiting North Korea, one of the most secretive places on the planet, it just kind of captures his imagination. His family, as you can imagine, was worried. But their fears were eased a bit by a Chinese tour company that was marketing these trips to Westerners, promising they were safe, structured adventures. He got there with his tour group on December 29th, celebrated New Year's, and everything seemed to be going fine. But on January 2nd, as they were all getting ready to fly out of Pyongyang, everything changed in an instant. North Korean officials just pulled Otto aside at airport security and took him into custody. That was the last time anyone in his tour group would ever see him conscious. For weeks, there was just silence. Nobody knew why he'd been detained. And then, the North Korean regime finally revealed the charge. And it was for an act that seemed almost, trivial. The official accusation was a hostile act against the state. North Korea even released this grainy surveillance footage that they claim showed Otto going into a staff-only area of his hotel and taking a propaganda poster off a wall. This single act, they argued, was a serious attempt to undermine the entire regime. Then, in February 2016, the world saw Otto again. He was paraded out in front of cameras for this highly scripted press conference. Visibly distressed, emotional, he tearfully read from a prepared statement confessing to the crime and just begging for forgiveness. The whole thing felt completely coerced and staged. And the regime's story was bizarre, to say the least. They didn't just accuse him of theft. No, they concocted this wild conspiracy theory. They claimed a U.S. church group and some secret society at his university had promised him a used car worth $10,000 if he stole the poster. The organizations he supposedly worked for, of course, denied ever even knowing him. So with this confession, no matter how unbelievable it seemed, the stage was now set for a trial. But this wasn't going to be any kind of ordinary legal proceeding. 15. That was the number. 15 years of hard labor. It's just a shocking verdict for the alleged crime of taking a poster. Yep, after a trial that lasted only 1 hour, that was the verdict. It was one of the harshest sentences ever handed down to a foreigner in North Korea. Otto had no independent lawyer, no way to appeal. His fate was basically sealed. After that sentencing, Otto Warmbier just vanished. He disappeared into the North Korean prison system. And for his family, and for U.S. diplomats, this long, agonizing period of silence began. The U.S. government was hitting a complete diplomatic stonewall. They were working through the Swedish embassy there in Pyongyang, and they repeatedly requested access to see Otto, demanded information on his condition. Every single request was either denied or just flat out ignored. For month after agonizing month, no one knew if he was okay. 17 months. That's how long Otto was held in captivity, completely cut off from the entire world. His family had no idea what was happening to him or if he was even still alive. Then, in June of 2017, after some really intense, quiet diplomatic negotiations, there was a breakthrough. North Korea announced they were going to release Otto. But the relief his family must have felt, it was incredibly short-lived, and it was replaced by an unimaginable horror. When the plane carrying him finally landed back in his home state of Ohio, his family discovered the devastating truth. Otto was alive, yes, but he was completely unresponsive. He had been in a coma for over a year. Immediately, you have these two totally different stories emerge. The North Korean regime claimed he got botulism, took a sleeping pill, and just fell into a coma. but American doctors found something entirely different. They concluded he had suffered a severe brain injury because his brain had been deprived of oxygen for a prolonged period, a cardiopulmonary event, that had happened a long, long time ago.
The medical evidence was just stark. Brain scans showed a massive loss of brain tissue all across his entire brain. There was absolutely no evidence of botulism, and while there were no signs of, say, broken bones, the doctors were certain he had suffered a catastrophic neurological injury more than a year before he was released. What caused it, though, remained a complete mystery. Back home, there was nothing that could be done. Doctors described his condition as unresponsive wakefulness. It meant he could open his eyes, but he couldn't see, he couldn't speak, he couldn't respond to anything. Faced with this irreversible reality, his family made the painful decision to remove his feeding tube. Just 6 days after returning to American soil, Otto Warmbier died. Otto's death sent shockwaves around the world. It left a legacy of anger, of grief, and of profound unanswered questions. The U.S. government took pretty immediate action. Just a month after he died, a travel ban was put in place, making it illegal for U.S. citizens to visit North Korea as tourists. It was a direct consequence of this tragedy, a measure to try and prevent it from ever happening again. And all of this leaves us with the final haunting question. What really happened to Otto inside that North Korean prison? How did a healthy 21-year-old end up with such a catastrophic brain injury? The thing is, we may never know the full truth. And that leaves this painful, tragic void right at the center of this story.